Welcome to the LeRue Press Network. My name is Janice Hermson, and I am here today with Trista Gomez, who is running for Washoe County Commissioner, District 4. And she was kind enough to contact me, which is wonderful. And Trista is probably not as well known as a couple of the other candidates that I've interviewed, but I think you're going to find her story very interesting. And I'm hoping that, this will help all the candidates to let our audience know who they are and learn more about the issues. And we're very issue driven here. And Trista is going to help us out. Trista, first, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's wonderful. And let us know a little bit about you, about how long you've been in Reno, kind of, and a little background about why would you decide to do something like this?
Okay. I have been here my whole life, other than I've tried to move a couple times, and Reno just pulls me back in. I'm a fourth generation Nevadan, and I have 4 kids. They're 16, 18, 27, and 28, almost 27 and 29. I know that I look like I shouldn't have those aged of children, but I do. I just put it out there. I know that that's what everybody's thinking, so I'll answer it. I come from just a, sort of a normal working class family. My mom's a truck driver. My dad's a grease monkey, we used to call him. And I went to college. I started actually going to college because I went to Post, the law enforcement academy. Oh. Yeah. So I did that first, and I was very young and very small and fairly naive, but it did give me 30 credits, and that 30 credits got me into criminal justice for an associate's degree. And then that degree, I had started to want to do juvenile probation. So for that, you needed a degree. And I ended up doing a social work degree. And I didn't work in juvenile justice other than my internship. And so then I did social work after that, my degrees in social work. And so that's my education. Let's see. I'm married. Yeah.
So from what you sent to me, you indicated that you kind of decided as a family that you wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. And then after you did that, then you decided to go into real estate.
I did. My husband made a comment at one point. He said, well, you don't have to stay home, but one of us is staying home. And so either you're staying home or I'm staying home, but one of us is raising these kids. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I guess I'll stay home then. And so it wasn't my preferred life path. But I do feel like it was an incredibly important time. And what I didn't understand at that time is that more than the littler kids, it was important for the teenagers. And it was a huge benefit for the teenagers, for me to have been home and available during their time. And so I'm glad I did it, but obviously it's a different life path than having a full-time, a full career. And when I needed to go back to work just for my sanity. And I said, well, I think I'll, go back and work in my field or in my degree. And my husband was kind of like, he actually suggested real estate as a flexible option. And, and actually it's been a lot of fun. And so that's what I've done for I got licensed in 2018, and I'm a broker salesman now. And that it works well because I also manage his office. I don't work there all the time, but I manage that office. I've still got kids. I still do sports. I still do all the things. I still do HOA, president. I'm still a volunteer. So because I have these other interests, that was a good path.
Right. So being in real estate, you have a real good idea of what's going on in the county. And I would imagine.
I do.
And I'm curious to know what the number one problem in the county is that you think needs to be resolved. And then how are you going to get that resolved before the end of your term?
I've heard the other candidates talk, and I don't think that we disagree on many things. I think the regionalization of safety services is important. We have that data. We've done that before. That's a budget item it looks like that's something that's currently being looked at. So fortunately, that's good. Election integrity. I think everybody wants to feel better about the election. Everybody just wants to feel secure that their votes are being counted, that they are being heard, that they're being represented adequately. So that's something, We're talking about the budget. The budget is high. It's a 30% increase from what I can tell over the last about 4 years, with only a 7% increase in population from what I can tell. So these are common issues I think that all of us are concerned about. And really what I'm finding, and having worked in the government, or even looking through the federal politics, it's not really that people aren't agreeing on the issues. It's really more about what is the mechanism that's preventing these issues from being heard, from being voted on, from being debated. And though that is really something that is a lot of concern to me, as far as there's the mechanism for, I've listened to these commission meetings and people are very angry. People feel disenfranchised. People feel like they really aren't being heard. These are valid concerns. And, I said at one of the meetings, even if I was the commissioner and they came to me and they said, hey, this is my concern, and I would say, hey, that's a super valid concern. Obviously, that needs to be addressed. It comes down to the mechanism of, can it get onto the agenda? Will the chairperson put it onto the agenda? Is there a mechanism if that doesn't happen? What is the recourse or the action so that we can make sure that those concerns, that those frustrations, that those angers are something that we can debate? Do we have town hall meetings? Do we publicize those town hall meetings? How do we get people so that this, statistically high distrust in government is addressed? What avenues, what mechanisms, what tools do we have so that people who should be heard, are being heard?
Would that be your number one concern to fix? Is that kind of where you're going with this?
I think given the fact that the rest of everything is, we agree on it. And actually, I don't even know that it's something that just Republicans agree on it. I think everybody wants these sorts of things sorted out, and I think with that, when you're talking about why aren't these things getting fixed, these are valid concerns that, my number one concern as far as the actual issues is budget. Let's figure out the budget. Let's figure out why we're approving these salary increases. Let's figure out why the revenue why we're needing more revenue versus, the raise in population. Let's figure out if the developers can pay for infrastructure instead of residents. I mean, these budget issues, these are a huge concern for me. And I think once you start to look at the budget issues, some of the other issues almost a little bit take care of themselves. You can't, if you're on a strict budget, you're not going to inflate salaries, these kinds of things. And so there's some of this is just watching, paying attention, bringing these kinds of items up. If we're giving these kinds of raises to some of our county managers, or any of them, how is that going to affect the revenue needed? How is that going to affect the residents who obviously are struggling? These kinds of things. And so the cost and budget would be my main concern, and then my second concern would be, in an umbrella form, how do we address all of the concerns that are such a frustration to these long-term or native residents?
Okay, so let's address, you mentioned a lot to unpack there.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's good. It's
okay, good.
But you mentioned election integrity, and anybody who knows me knows it's something that's very close to me.
Mm-hmm.
But it's close to a lot of people. And as you mentioned, I think that is across the board. I don't think that that's a Republican issue. I think it's Democrat, Independent, it's everyone.
Right.
So some of the challenges that have been faced by the commissioners today have been about putting election integrity on the agenda.
Mm-hmm.
And it is being, I guess I would call it stonewalled by the chair.
Right.
How would you find a way around that? Because it's something that they've proposed, and she's at this point at least ignoring.
Right now, I was talking to somebody from another jurisdiction, and there was an idea of, let's expose the fact that this isn't happening right now. Let's expose the fact that, she's Alexis Hill, she's the chair, that she's not putting these items on the agenda. When she took out public comment at the beginning of the meetings, there was a huge outrage, and that outrage caused her to reverse course. Obviously, that's the easiest thing to do. I've heard Tracy talk about the ethics complaints. You can do that. I think the most effective thing to do would be to I spoke to one group. They didn't even know that Alexis had that much control over the agenda items. They didn't know
that.
that
Would be your approach.
My approach.
Trying to ram it down, then you go ahead and go to the people and see if maybe the people can make a difference.
The people are incredibly effective when they understand the mechanisms and how they're working. If we have town hall meetings and we are allowed to control that agenda. So if I have a town hall meeting and I want to be there and I want to listen to everybody, I'm not going to control those comments other than time or, threats or anything like that. And so with that kind of openness, that kind of transparency that's allowed inside of a public forum and structured to include all of that public comment and public feedback, I think also that might inherently sort of take care of some of these problems. Outside of ethics complaints and replacing her as the chair, which everybody hopes that she's replaced as the chair. There's the public comment. I don't know. Once I would be there, I would have to look at anything, what other venues or mechanisms do we have? And I think you'd have to take every opportunity and pull every cord to try to figure out which one works so that people feel like they're heard. I feel like when I'm listening to people, I'm feeling like people are not feeling heard. And it's a huge problem. And it's a nationwide problem. And it's a statistical recorded problem. And there's a way to fix it.
Okay. There are quite a number of overdose deaths, including fentanyl, that have been rising in the county. Can you offer any solutions of how that can be combated?
Yes. Well, let's start with some. Okay, so we have the CARES campus, and the CARES campus, I'm not going to rail on the CARES campus. I feel like as far as a resource that's needed, I think we have to have some resources. This is a nationwide homeless problem. Fentanyl is just a nationwide problem. I have friends, deeply affected by, a fentanyl death. And so I feel like there has to be some kind of resource. Now, where the rub comes in for a lot of people, I think, is, I come from the world of social work, treatment, all of these things. And what doesn't happen and what we know not to be effective is to enable behavior that is destructive or continues, or is allowed, that's harmful. So there's a couple things. Not only does that harm that person to be allowed to do that, and there's a lot of sort of secrecy behind the CARES campus, but one of the allegations is that there's drug use allowed inside of that campus, and that people who are homeless, who aren't active drug users, don't want to go to that campus. That's an allegation. We'd all love to figure out what's true. Everybody wants an audit of the CARES campus. That's right, another thing.
In the video that they put out recently, they did state that was not allowed.
Right.
So, and then again, like you said, there are a number of people who've been in the CARES campus that have been residents there.
Right.
That just won't go back.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons that they stay.
And so a couple, I know people don't want criminalization for drug use, but the reality is when you take somebody out of a situation and you put them into a situation where they are, they're removed from that drug, they're going to have some time to figure out whether or not they want to do that again. And it's like, physiologically, there's an effect of not having that constant input, and so for their safety, it's not even just to be, over criminalization or law enforcement heavy, but this is for the good of that person who's continuing to intake that deadly drug, so that's one thing. I believe that there is some intelligence around the people who are dealing, how those drugs are coming into town. Let's really create a more responsive mechanism for law enforcement to address the intake of those, the fentanyl, things like that. I think when you're looking at the more tangible resources, let's remove them. Let's create a law enforcement mechanism where we can deal with the dealing, and really throw some hard penalties at people who are coming into the community with those drugs.
Okay, so all of this takes money.
All of it takes money.
Yes, it does. And the local county budget is pretty high and is exceeding 2 to 3 times that of other counties in the U.S. And you even mentioned the budget in your opening. What do you propose to do to be able to do the things that you're talking about? But at the same time, do you think we need to reduce the budget? If not, what would you do?
Okay. I have spent a lot of time on the budget and just looking at the budget, looking at comparisons. And so all I can do is look at what is there, and those budget reports, they're 237 pages long. You're trying to kind of figure out what's what. As far as when you're looking, and I take it like a home budget, like if I'm in a home budget, I'm like, listen, I really need to replace my garage door, but I also really need this burglar system because I'm now living it. My crime has gone up. The public safety, there's one thing I think that would not take a lot of money, and it's when you talk to law enforcement, some of the policies that would be the most helpful to them to make their job more effective, those have been, they've policy-wise, they've made some of that hard to do as far as law enforcement's concerned. So let's give them some power back. That doesn't take any money, other than it's going to take some more, it might take some more money in the arrests and then jails. But let's give them some power back. I know law enforcement, and I'm not saying every one of them is good, but I think in general, they're good people. And so let's give them some power back to keep us safe. I want to be safe. I want my kids to be safe. My daughter was driving down 4th Street a couple of weeks ago, and it was night. She was driving back from her brother's house, and a homeless man, she was on 4th Street, came and tried to open her door. She's young. We have talked extensively about safety measures. She locked her door, and she was like, I was at the red light. And I'm like, next time run the red light. And so we need to give police the ability to keep us safe.
Right.
That's what they're there for. That's what they're trained for. We want them to do that.
Right.
And so that doesn't cost any money other than there's probably going to be an increase maybe in inmates in the jail. Right.
Sure.
And then outside of that, I think we really have to take a critical look at personnel. Are we looking at, do we want to increase clerical and administrative personnel? We know we're administrative heavy. Since I've been around, we've always been administrative heavy. The frontline workers are really the workers that we need. We need those people. They have a lot of input. They have a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience. Let's start to get them more involved in some of these policy making decisions. And then after that, really start to decide, do we want more clerical administrative? And then, or can we either pause that or cut it down a little bit and then put some more money and resources into, and when I say just not into, like, let's not just push money into public safety and just say for whatever, but let's give them put more money in, give them some more resources. And then in addition, let them do their jobs effectively based on research. But, we can look at other jurisdictions and compare those jurisdictions. Let's let them do that. And that would probably alleviate a lot of the problems, and they'd feel more invested. I feel like, if you're talking to somebody who's trying to do a job and they can't do that job because their hands are tied as far as policies are concerned, one of the things is they're going to feel more effective. They're going to be more effective if those policies aren't hand tying them.
So from the standpoint of whether or not that means you're going to increase the budget, or are you going to reduce the budget from some of these activities that you're talking about? Which way do you think that's going to go? Because it sounds like you've really examined the budget, so you kind of know where that is. And I know you have no hard numbers to look at.
I have no hard, when you're looking at the budget, what happens is you're like, okay, this is the number I think that people are talking about, the CARES campus. The CARES campus was a huge amount of money at the beginning, and it was a huge amount of money. Right. And now we have to think, okay, like we keep putting more money into this resource. Do we need to do that? Or can we use this resource as it is? So can we do some of that? I don't know at this point with the amount of crime and, just things that there are. Maybe we can't reduce the budget, but what we can do is we can increase cost, we can increase fees for developers. We can increase fees for those kinds of things, which I do think would make a difference. That would be something that would be, I think, a more just and equal position as far as like they're contributing, they're making a huge profit off of those developments. Residents shouldn't be footing the bill. People are so strapped. They're so strapped. We don't need to be raising their property taxes when a developer easily, maybe not easily, maybe it's not with the profit margin that they want it to be, but they can be footing some of those costs, right? So let's do that. Let's take a hard look let's get some providers, some experienced providers involved. How can we make this CARES campus efficient? How can we keep people safe? How can we cut costs? I think when you're looking at departments, I do have this idea that people who work in those departments, and that's why I think frontline workers are so important. They're so knowledgeable. They just know, hey, in your department, what could be cut, and I think when you're looking at those kinds of things, I think there's room to make those cuts for the benefit of the residents, not compromise safety. Do I think it can be a cut a lot? I don't know. I can't really figure that out based on what I can find online. But I think we all know that with administration inflation and, these kinds of exaggerated, costs and extra clericals, whatever it is, I do think that there's room to at least stay the same. I mean, a 30% increase over 4 years from what I can find, that's a lot. Let's stop the bleeding first. Right. And then let's figure out how to keep people safe. And then let's figure out if we can reduce some of those inflated departments, things like that.
Okay. I want to read a quote. This is from a Board of Commissioners meeting from September 28th of 2021. The Board of County Commissioners may make a grant of money to a nonprofit organization created for religious, charitable, or educational purposes, or to a governmental entity to be expended for a selected purpose up to $100,000 per commissioner. Where do you stand on that?
I just don't think that that's the right thing to do for residents at this point. I think when you're asking people when you're saying, we need to charge you more, we need to raise your property taxes, we need to do these things, but we're going to give kind of our pet causes, these massive resources, and maybe they're not massive, right? I mean, you're talking about $100,000 is, it's a percent, of the overall budget. So I get that. But at the same time, is that the most responsible thing to do? I think we can say no. I think we can say, no, that's not the most responsible thing to do. Let's make that transparent. Let's make it voted on. Let's cap our, when you're talking about this is ultimately residents' money. Let's let residents have a say maybe in what they'd like that money to go to. Do we need $500,000 to go to nonprofits? What is that? And the other thing that is how that funding is used inside of the population of a whole, right? So if you have funding that's going towards something that's going to create a higher lobbying for regulations or something like this. I mean, we should know where that money is going to, not just because it's money that's being spent, that's our money, but also because we want to make sure funding always follows kind of a policy, and we want to make sure that funding isn't creating an undue burden or extra stress or something on the residents in general.
Okay. So as long as we're talking about money, let's talk about the county manager who has contractual, he can make expenditures to purchase supplies, materials, equipment, and contractual services per vendor contract up to $300,000 without commissioner approval. Would you, if you given the opportunity, would you maintain that amount? Would you reduce the amount? Would it be more? Would you get rid of it? What would you do with that?
I think we need to remember that the county manager works for the elected board. And so the elected board is responsible for all of that money. And I mean, I own a business. I have a petty cash envelope. I mean, I do. So it's so much easier to do that, okay, I gotta, whatever
it
is.
That seems to be what this is for him.
And but $300,000 is a big petty cash envelope, big petty cash envelope. And so we, I think if you're giving $500,000, for the commission, and then you're giving $300,000 to the manager, that's nearly $1 million. And residents should get to know what that entails and should have a say in where that money goes.
Okay, very good. And then you mentioned public comment during your brief interlude there. Would you vote for the adoption of an ordinance to identify a lobbyist when providing public comment? In other words, that they had to identify themselves as a lobbyist before they could do public comment. Would you vote for that?
I feel like I'm on the other side of this, but I think I would.
Oh,
I think I know. And I'll tell you why. I have been in meetings. I went to when they were doing ESA funding a long time ago, like I think in 2017, and I went to the state capitol and I spoke for ESA, which is Educational Savings Account funding. Parents should have a right to know, to have some education, say over their kids. And so I was in there, and I remember I had a great statement. I wrote it all out. I did a great job, I think. And then there was this other lobbyist who came in, and I didn't know he was a lobbyist. And, here's the thing about the lobbyists is they have a lot of resources. They have a lot of backing, and and ultimately they're highly trained. And so because of that, and because it really could impact, what they're saying really could impact the outcome of some of these decisions. And because they're being paid by somebody who's probably, on a side, maybe that we would want to know where that is. I don't know that it's a bad idea for them to have to identify themselves as lobbyists. Now, are there nuances to that? I've heard this issue come up a long time. I would love to know, why, but I can see where it would be beneficial for in the realm of transparency for all of the public to know that this is a trained, paid person,
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair. So we only have a minute or two left, and I want to make sure that you tell people where they can find you and how they can get to know you more.
Okay. My website is Trista, 4, Washoe, so Trista, 4, Washoe.com. You can email me. My phone number's on there. Invite me to your barbecue. Invite me to your barbecue in your wine night. I want to go. I want to talk to your friends. I literally will go almost anywhere, if I feel like, it's safe, I kind of have a way we have a real estate app to do that. But I want to go, I want to talk to you. Please let me talk to you. I have a Facebook page. I posted about my chickens this morning. I'm trying to figure all that out, right? It's a lot of work to do with all this, but that's the main way that you can figure out where I am. And I am trying to be a little bit, keeping my kids safe and all of that stuff, trying to post some stuff about, chickens, gardens, whatever it is that I do.
Sure.
And so you can find more information there.
Okay, perfect.
Yes.
All right. Well, I really do appreciate you coming in. And you may or may not know, LeRue Network is fairly new. So we appreciate everybody that comes by and says hello. And, And I wish you the best. And I'm sure we'll see you on the trail.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me. Okay.
Thanks so much.